When Leo slid off the Arabian stallion and kissed its muzzle under the reverent silence of hundreds of spectators, no one imagined that this moment would forever change how an entire society viewed true human worth. But to understand how a 10-year-old boy with Down syndrome managed to tame not only the wildest horse in the country, but also the deeply ingrained prejudices of an arrogant elite, we must go back in time and learn the story that preceded that golden sunset. 3 weeks before that historic moment, the sprawling Sunny Meadows Ranch buzzed with unusual activity. Arthur Montgomery, the billionaire owner of the land, had issued the most audacious challenge of his career: $10 million to anyone who could tame Tempest in just 3 days. The Arabian stallion, with fur as black as night and eyes that seemed to hold storms, was known throughout the country as untamable. Its reputation spread through equestrian circles like a living legend, a creature of majestic beauty that had never accepted a bridle or saddle, rearing on its hind legs like a hurricane of muscle and power whenever anyone tried to subdue it. Arthur cultivated an almost obsessive pride in owning this magnificent creature. During his extravagant parties, where celebrities and magnates gathered under crystal chandeliers and sipped French champagne, he made a point of recounting Tempest's exploits. 15 trainers have already tried, he'd say, with a smile that blended satisfaction and defiance. Some of the best in the world. All went away with their tails between their legs. The challenge was more than a gamble. It was an assertion of power. Arthur saw in Tempest a reflection of himself, untamable, superior, above the mediocre attempts of others. The horse was his mirror, his proof that some forces of nature couldn't be bought, only possessed by those worthy enough. News of the $1 million prize spread like wildfire. From all over the country came applicants. Famous trainers with golden resumes, seasoned cowboys with decades of rodeo experience under their belts, even international specialists lured by the astronomical sum and the prestige that would come with victory. The 200-acre ranch transformed into a veritable battleground where inflamed egos clashed against the unrelenting reality of Tempest's wild nature. One by one, they all failed. The first, a Texan named Jack Morrison, famous for taming bucking broncos in American rodeos, lasted exactly 43 minutes before being violently thrown to the dirt floor of the corral. His arrogance evaporated along with the dust his boots kicked up as he ran from Tempest's furious hooves. The second, Eduardo Rodriguez, a 3-time Brazilian equestrian champion, attempted a more technical approach with sophisticated equipment and scientific methods. Tempest destroyed 3 saddles in a row and broke 2 imported leather bridles before Eduardo admitted defeat. As the days passed and the failures mounted, Arthur's satisfaction grew. Each failed attempt reinforced his conviction that he and Tempest formed a unique, special pair above the ordinary. The billionaire even raised the stakes to $15 million, then $20, attracting even more desperate candidates and increasing the spectacle unfolding on his property. It was during this circus of frustrated attempts that Leo observed everything from afar, with the curious eyes and sensitive heart of a child who saw the world differently. Leo was the son of Roberto, the groundskeeper of Sunny Meadows Ranch for over 15 years. The man with calloused hands and a generous heart had found not only work on that land, but a home to raise his special son. Leo was born with Down syndrome, and from a young age he faced the condescending stares and lowered expectations of those around him. Neighbors and relatives melted before his natural sweetness, but few truly believed in him and his ability to achieve anything significant in the world. The boy, however, possessed a rare gift that few could see. His connection with animals was almost mystical. While others saw animals, Leo saw souls. He spent hours in the company of the ranch horses, the sheepdogs, the barnyard chickens, and even the wildcats that appeared on moonlit nights. There was something in his presence that calmed them, a serene energy that seemed to flow from his heart to theirs. Roberto noticed this special ability in his son, but attributed it to the innocence of childhood. Leo has a way with animals, he'd say to the other employees, without imagining that this sensitivity was much deeper and more powerful than it appeared. During the frantic days of the attempts to tame Tempest, Leo followed all the commotion from a distance. He hid behind the wooden fences, carefully observing each attempt by the trainers. But while everyone focused on techniques and equipment, Leo paid attention to something different: Tempest's eyes. The boy saw beyond the animal's apparent fury. Behind the deafening whinnies and violent kicks, Leo saw fear, loneliness, and deep sadness. Tempest wasn't wild by nature. He had become wild out of necessity, as a way of protecting himself from years of brutal attempts at domination. On quiet afternoons, when the circus of trainers packed up and the ranch regained some of its peace, Leo approached the corral where Tempest was kept. The horse, exhausted from the daily battles, would stand motionless in a corner, its head down and its gaze lost. It was in these moments that Leo felt closest to him. "You're tired, aren't you?" the boy would murmur, keeping a respectful distance from the bars. Tempest raised his head at the sound of Leo's soft voice, and for a few moments their eyes met. There was no challenge in that gaze, no fear. There was something the boy recognized immediately: mutual understanding. Roberto was the first to notice his unusual interest in the problematic stallion. "Leo, you shouldn't get too close to that horse," he warned affectionately. "He's dangerous. He's hurt a lot of good people." But Leo shook his head with that peculiar wisdom that sometimes sprang from his simple words. "He's not dangerous, Dad. He's in pain." Roberto frowned, intrigued. His son often said things that seemed too obvious or too profound for his age and condition. "What kind of pain, son?" "Pain here," Leo replied, placing his small hand over his chest. "The same pain I feel when people whisper about me, thinking I don't hear." Those words touched Roberto in a way he hadn't expected. For the first time, he began to consider that maybe his son saw something everyone else had missed. Meanwhile, Arthur Montero was growing impatient. After 3 weeks of failed attempts, the challenge was starting to tarnish his reputation. Some guests whispered that Tempest might be truly untamable, which wasn't exactly what Arthur wanted to hear. The horse was supposed to be a testament to his superiority, not his inability. That's when Arthur decided to make one last grand event. He would invite the crème de la crème of society, journalists, and even some international personalities for a final, definitive attempt. If no one could tame Tempest on this last opportunity, he would officially end the challenge and keep the horse as his personal, untouchable trophy. News of the last chance spread quickly, and Sunny Meadows Ranch transformed into a veritable social event. Imported cars, private helicopters, and even a small jet landed on Arthur's private airstrip. Celebrities, businessmen, politicians, and socialites crowded the grandstand specially erected for the occasion. Arthur had hired the 3 best remaining trainers: a renowned Argentinian known for his revolutionary methods, an American who worked with Hollywood horses, and a Brazilian holding national records in various equestrian categories. The morning of the big event dawned bright and golden. The ranch had never received so much attention, and Arthur felt like an emperor presiding over his domain. Dressed in his finest Italian suit and sporting a Swiss watch that cost more than a house, he addressed the elegant audience on the importance of tradition, excellence, and human determination. "Tempest represents more than just a horse," he declared in a pompous voice. "He represents the ultimate challenge, the definitive proof that some of us are born to conquer the unconquerable." The audience applauded politely, but everyone was eager to see the spectacle begin. Side bets were running rampant. Some risked that none of the 3 trainers would succeed. Others bet heavily on the Argentinian, considered the favorite. That's when something unexpected happened. Leo, observing all the commotion with his curious eyes, made a decision that surprised even himself. He approached his father, who was busy organizing the trainer's equipment, and gently tugged at his shirt. "Dad," he said in that soft voice that always melted Roberto's heart, "can I try too?" Roberto stopped what he was doing and looked at his son with a mixture of affection and concern. "Try what, Leo?" "To talk to Tempest." At first, Roberto thought it was just the innocent curiosity of a child, but there was something in Leo's eyes, a serene determination he rarely saw. "Son, that horse is very dangerous. You could get hurt." "He won't hurt me," Leo replied with a conviction that surprised Roberto. Roberto looked around at all the important people and the money involved and felt a mix of paternal protectiveness and genuine curiosity. He knew his son better than anyone and knew that despite his special condition, Leo possessed a keen intuition for certain things. "And how do you plan to do that?" he asked, more to test the boy's determination than to truly believe in the possibility. Leo smiled that pure, sincere smile that always illuminated his face. "I'll ask Mr. Arthur to let me try." Roberto almost laughed at his son's naivete, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of the countless times Leo had surprised everyone with his unexpected wisdom, or maybe it was just the paternal instinct to support his son's dreams, however impossible they seemed. "Are you sure about this, my boy?" "I am, Dad. Tempest needs someone who isn't afraid of him." Those words echoed in Roberto's mind like a bell. He looked at his son, really looked, and for the first time saw not the special child who needed protection, but a human being with a unique perception and a courage that might be greater than any of the adults present at that event. "All right," he said finally. "Let's talk to Mr. Arthur." The walk to the VIP area where Arthur was receiving his illustrious guests seemed to last an eternity for Leo. His small legs could barely keep up with Roberto's pace, and his heart beat strongly in his chest. But it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. When they finally reached the reserved area, Roberto excused himself and requested a few minutes with his boss. Arthur, in the middle of a lively conversation about international business, responded with the automatic courtesy he reserved for employees on social occasions. "What is it, Roberto? Some problem with the equipment?" Roberto took a deep breath and put his hand on Leo's shoulder. "Mr. Arthur, my son would like to try to tame Tempest." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Arthur blinked a few times, as if he hadn't understood correctly. The nearby guests stopped their conversations and turned to the unusual scene. "Pardon?" said Arthur, with a smile that showed more confusion than anything. "Leo believes he can tame the horse," Roberto repeated, feeling the weight of curious glances and some muffled laughter in the background. Arthur looked at Leo, really looked at him for the first time in years of coexisting on the ranch. He saw a small boy with the characteristic features of Down syndrome, wearing simple clothes and carrying in his eyes a sincerity that cut like a knife. "Roberto," Arthur said, lowering his voice in a tone that attempted to be gentle, "you know your son. Well, he has his limitations. That animal has thrown men 3 times his size." "I know I can," Leo interrupted, with a firm voice that surprised everyone. "Not to win the money, to help Tempest." The response completely disarmed Arthur. There was no greed in the boy's words, no arrogance. There was only a pure determination that he couldn't comprehend. Some of the nearby guests began to murmur among themselves. Others openly laughed at the situation. "The special boy wants to tame the impossible horse," commented a socialite in a tone that mixed amusement and condescension. But Arthur, for some reason he couldn't explain, felt intrigued. Perhaps it was the extreme contrast between the simplicity of Leo's proposal and the complexity of the entire event. Perhaps it was just morbid curiosity. Or perhaps, deep down in his heart, hardened by power and money, a thread of genuine humanity still remained. "All right," he finally said, causing general surprise. Some found the idea hilarious, others considered it in bad taste, but all agreed that it would be interesting to see what would come of this unusual situation. And it was at this point in the story that many of those present began to question their own prejudices and expectations, a reflection that would deepen in the following days and forever change the way they viewed human potential. If you're following this story and are moved by Leo's journey, subscribe to the channel to not miss other touching stories like this, which show how true strength often comes from the most unexpected places. The three professional trainers made their attempts throughout the morning, each with their specific method and elaborate strategies. The Argentinian tried a psychological approach, studying Tempest's movements before approaching. He lasted 17 minutes before being violently thrown. The American used state-of-the-art equipment and techniques developed in American laboratories. She managed to put a saddle on the horse but was thrown away as soon as she tried to mount. The Brazilian, with all his experience and medals, didn't even get close. Tempest expelled him from the corral before he could even attempt any approach. When Leo's turn arrived, the sun was high, and the audience, which had started out lively, showed signs of fatigue and skepticism. Many considered it a waste of time. Others saw it as an end-of-event curiosity. Arthur made the official announcement in a tone that mixed seriousness and restrained amusement. Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, our last attempt will be made by Leo, son of our ranch hand Roberto. The applause was polite but unenthusiastic. Some guests took the opportunity to go to the bar for more drinks, thinking the event had come to an end. Leo walked to the center of the corral with small but determined steps. He didn't carry sophisticated equipment, he didn't wear special boots or a protective helmet. He only carried a handful of hay that he had gathered from the ranch and a heart full of a hope that the adults around him had lost a long time ago. Tempest was at the back of the corral, visibly exhausted from the morning battles. His black coat was sweaty, his breathing was heavy, and his eyes carried a fury mixed with deep fatigue. When he saw Leo approaching, he raised his head and let out a neigh that echoed throughout the ranch. But Leo didn't get scared. Instead of backing down, as so many others had done, he stopped where he was and began to speak. "Hi, Tempest," he said, with that soft voice that only children possess. "I know you're tired. I get tired sometimes too." The horse tilted its head as if trying to understand that sound different from the shouts and commands it was used to hearing. Leo sat on the dirt floor, still at a safe distance, and continued talking. "People think you're mean, but I know you're just scared. I'm scared sometimes too, scared of not being how other people want me to be." In the audience, silence began to spread. There was something in the scene unfolding that unexpectedly held their attention. Arthur leaned forward in his chair, intrigued by the boy's completely unconventional approach. "You know," Leo continued, slowly extending the hay in his direction, "my dad always tells me that being different isn't bad, it's just being different. And you're different too, aren't you? That's why people don't understand you." Tempest took a few steps towards Leo, still cautious, but clearly curious. He had never heard anyone speak to him like that, without authority, without fear, only with understanding. "I don't want you to do anything you don't want to," Leo said, allowing the horse to approach the hay. "I just want to be your friend. Do you have friends, Tempest?" When the stallion finally touched the hay with its muzzle, a murmur ran through the audience. That was closer than any trainer had gotten in 3 weeks. Leo remained motionless while Tempest ate the hay, allowing the animal to get used to his presence. "You're very beautiful," he murmured. "I bet when you run free in the field, it looks like you're flying." Slowly, very slowly, Leo reached out towards Tempest's muzzle. The horse hesitated for a moment, then allowed the boy's small fingers to touch its skin. It was a moment of pure connection, without an agenda, without goals, beyond the simple desire to establish a bond. "Okay," Leo said, smiling, "we're friends now." That first day ended with Leo simply sitting beside Tempest, talking softly and sharing hay. There were no attempts to put on harnesses, saddles, or reins. Just two beings who recognized themselves as equals in their difference. The audience left confused and intrigued. It hadn't been a taming attempt in the traditional sense, but there was something about their interaction that no one could ignore. Arthur, especially, was disturbed in a way he couldn't explain. On the second day, when Leo returned to the corral, Tempest was waiting near the fence. The recognition was evident. The horse clearly remembered the boy and the sense of peace his presence brought. This time, Leo brought a simple rope, made of soft material. "Today, I thought we could take a walk together," he said, showing the rope to Tempest. "But only if you want to. If you don't want to, that's okay." The difference in approach was striking. While other trainers had tried to impose their will on the animal, Leo offered choice, and Tempest, for the first time in his life, felt he had the power to decide. The process was slow and respectful. Leo explained each movement, asked permission at every step, and Tempest responded with a docility that shocked all the observers. When the boy finally put the rope around the horse's neck, without force, without imposition, it was as if two old friends were reuniting. "Shall we walk together now?" Leo asked, and Tempest answered by taking a step forward. The walk around the corral was a moment of pure poetry. Boy and horse moved in harmony, one following the rhythm of the other, in a silent dance that spoke louder than any training technique. But the most surprising moment came when Leo, with the naturalness of someone playing in their backyard, positioned himself beside Tempest and, leaning on his mane, climbed onto his back. The audience held its breath. This was the moment when all the other trainers had been violently thrown off. But Tempest remained steady, only turning his head to look at Leo with those deep eyes that now carried something new: trust. "Thank you for letting me stay here," Leo murmured, stroking the animal's neck. "You're very kind." They remained like that for several minutes, the boy on the back of the untamed horse, both in perfect harmony. There was no domination there, no winner or loser. There was only a pure friendship that transcended the barriers of verbal communication. When Leo got down, he hugged Tempest's neck and murmured, "Tomorrow is our last day with all these people. How about we show them how real friends behave?" On the third and final day, Sunny Meadows Ranch was busier than ever. News of what was happening had spread, and journalists, curious onlookers, and even animal behavior specialists had joined the original audience. Arthur had installed sound systems so everyone could hear what was happening in the corral. When Leo appeared for his final session, he was carrying only a small, soft rein made of supple leather. Tempest was waiting near the gate, and for the first time in weeks, there was something different about his posture. There was no tension, no aggressive preparation. There was positive anticipation. "Today, we'll take our final ride together," Leo said, placing the rein with the delicacy of someone handling a precious jewel. "Are you ready?" What happened next was described by those present as one of the most moving moments they had ever witnessed. Leo mounted Tempest with the ease of someone riding a carousel horse, and the stallion responded by beginning to walk around the corral with a grace and elegance that no one had imagined he possessed. There was no struggle, no resistance. Every movement was fluid, harmonious, as if boy and horse were parts of the same being. When Tempest neighed, it wasn't a sound of defiance or fury. It was almost like a song of joy. Leo guided the horse through a series of simple but beautiful movements, demonstrating that Tempest was not only tamed but happy. With each gentle command, the animal responded with enthusiasm, as if he had finally found someone who spoke his language. The culminating moment came when Leo, leaning over Tempest's neck, murmured something only the horse could hear. Tempest then did something no one had ever seen. He lowered his head in a gesture that seemed almost reverential, allowing Leo to dismount, and then rested his muzzle against the boy's face in a gesture of pure affection. The silence that followed was broken by a wave of applause that started slowly and grew until it became deafening. Tears streamed down the faces of many in the audience, including Arthur, who rose from his chair with trembling hands. "He did it," someone murmured in the audience. "The boy really did it." But when Arthur approached Leo with the check for $10 million, ready to fulfill his promise, the boy did something no one expected. "I'd rather keep Tempest," he said with the simplicity that had always characterized his words. He chose me first. The impact of those words was immediate and profound. Arthur stood still, holding the check in the air as he processed what he had just heard. Around them, the audience fell into complete silence, understanding that they were witnessing something much bigger than a simple demonstration of horse training. There was a boy who had been underestimated his whole life, rejecting a fortune in the name of true friendship. There was proof that human worth was not measured by money, status, or physical perfection, but by the capacity to love genuinely. Arthur looked at the check in his hands, then at Leo, then at Tempest. For the first time in decades, he felt an emotion he had forgotten existed: true humility. That boy, whom he had always seen only as the groundskeeper's special son, had just taught him a lesson about values that all his riches hadn't been able to buy. Slowly, Arthur tore up the check in front of everyone. The sound of the paper tearing echoed through the sound system like a historical landmark. "Leo," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you tamed much more than a horse today. You tamed the prejudices of us all." Then, in a decision that surprised even himself, Arthur made the announcement that would change everything. "I'm giving Leo Sunny Meadows Ranch. He's proven he deserves far more than money. He deserves the recognition that true human value is priceless." What followed was a mix of shock, admiration, and intense emotion. Some people cried openly, others applauded standing up, and many simply fell silent, processing the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Roberto, who had watched everything with his heart in his throat, approached his son with tears in his eyes. "My boy," he said, embracing Leo, "you are much stronger than I ever imagined." "It wasn't strength, Dad," Leo replied, still stroking Tempest. "It was just love. Tempest just needed someone who loved him for who he is." Those words echoed in the hearts of everyone present like a universal truth. There was the purest lesson any of them had ever received: the transformative power of unconditional love. In the days that followed, the story of Leo and Tempest spread throughout the country. Newspapers, magazines, television programs, and social media shared the account of that extraordinary encounter between a special boy and an untamable horse. But for those who were present that golden evening, the true transformation wasn't in the headlines or the reports. It was in the profound change that had taken place in their own hearts. Arthur Montero, who for decades had measured people's worth by their bank account and social standing, found himself completely rethinking his worldview. The decision to give the ranch to Leo hadn't been a momentary impulse. It had been the recognition of a truth he had ignored for years. True power wasn't in the ability to dominate or possess, but in the ability to connect, understand, and love. In the following months, Arthur became an active advocate for the rights of people with disabilities, using his influence and resources to create inclusion programs and opportunities. The transformation of the arrogant billionaire into a humane and compassionate man became almost as inspiring as Leo's own story. Roberto, in turn, discovered that his role as a father was far more complex and beautiful than he had imagined. For years, he had protected Leo from the world, when in reality, he should have protected the world from his extraordinary wisdom. From that day on, he began to see Leo not as a child who needed special care, but a special human being who had much to teach the world. Sunny Meadows Ranch, now officially owned by Leo, transformed into something completely different. Instead of a symbol of ostentation and power, it became a refuge for abused animals and an animal-assisted therapy center for children and adults with special needs. Leo, with his natural sensitivity and his unique connection with animals, became the beating heart of a place where healing happened through unconditional love. Tempest, finally free from the pressure of being a test of human domination, flourished in a way that no one had imagined possible. Under Leo's loving care, he revealed himself not only a magnificent horse, but an extraordinary therapeutic partner. His transformation from a wild and aggressive animal to a gentle and affectionate being became a powerful symbol of how love can heal even the deepest wounds. Together, Leo and Tempest developed a partnership that transcended the barriers of common communication. They worked with autistic children, adults with depression, war veterans with PTSD, and anyone who needed to rediscover trust in the world. Leo's serene presence and Tempest's majestic gentleness created an environment where healing was possible. One of the ranch's regular visitors was Maria, an 8-year-old girl who had lost her ability to speak after a traumatic accident. For months, therapists and doctors had tried different approaches without success. But it only took a few sessions with Leo and Tempest for her to start murmuring low words, then sentences, and finally return to talking normally. "How do you do it?" Maria's mother asked Leo, tears in her eyes after seeing her daughter laugh for the first time in months. Leo smiled with that pure smile that always illuminated his face. "I don't do anything special," he replied. "I just listen to what her heart is saying, and Tempest listens too. When someone feels truly heard, the words appear on their own." That simple yet profound wisdom became the central philosophy of the work developed on the ranch. It wasn't about applying sophisticated techniques or complex scientific methods. It was about offering genuine presence, unconditional acceptance, and judgment-free love. Leo's story also inspired significant changes in the local community. Schools began to rethink their inclusion programs. Companies opened up more opportunities for people with disabilities, and entire families discovered that they had much to learn from those they had always considered different. One of these families was the Santos family, neighbors of the ranch who had a teenage son with Down syndrome. For years, they had limited the boy's activities out of fear and overprotection. After meeting Leo and seeing all he had accomplished, they began to encourage their son to explore his own talents and dreams. "Leo showed me that my son doesn't need fewer opportunities," the boy's mother said during a school meeting. "He needs different opportunities, and we all need to learn to see potential instead of limitations." This shift in perspective spread like ripples in a pond, touching more and more people and communities. Teachers began adapting their teaching methods. Doctors started having more hopeful conversations with parents of special children. And society as a whole began to question its own definitions of normalcy and human value. But perhaps the most profound impact of Leo's story was on how people began to see their own differences and limitations. Many who witnessed that extraordinary demonstration of human connection began to question their own internal biases and seek more authentic ways of relating to the world. Eduardo Rodriguez, one of the executives who had been present at the event, spent weeks reflecting on what he had witnessed. A successful businessman, but with deep difficulties in personal relationships, he began to realize that his own inability to genuinely connect with people was a far more serious limitation than any physical or intellectual disability. "That boy taught me that I am emotionally deficient," he confessed to his wife during a conversation that changed the course of their marriage. "I spent my whole life thinking that intelligence was just a matter of IQ, when in fact his emotional intelligence is far superior to mine." Stories like this multiplied over the following months. Sunny Meadows Ranch became not only a therapy center, but a place of pilgrimage for people seeking to rediscover authentic human values in an increasingly superficial and materialistic world. Leo, always humble and natural, did not let himself be affected by the fame or attention his story had attracted. He remained the same sweet and wise boy, more interested in caring for his animals and helping the people who visited him than in any public recognition. "Why do you think you were able to tame Tempest when so many professionals failed?" a journalist asked during one of the rare interviews Leo gave. The boy thought for a moment, stroking Tempest's mane, who was standing beside him. "I think the others wanted to tame him to show they were strong," he finally replied. I just wanted to be his friend, and friends don't need to tame each other. That answer, broadcast nationally, became one of the most quoted and shared phrases of that year. It perfectly captured the essence of the transformation Leo had brought about, a shift from a mentality of domination to one of partnership and mutual understanding. Years later, when the story of Leo and Tempest had already become legend, many of those who were present on that golden day still remembered with emotion the exact moment their lives changed. It wasn't when the boy rode the horse, nor when he refused the money. It was in the silent instant when they understood that they were witnessing a pure demonstration of unconditional love. Arthur, now a dedicated philanthropist, used to say in his lectures, "I spent decades trying to prove my worth through what I possessed. Leo taught me that our worth lies in what we are able to give to the world." And what he gave that day was a lesson on humanity that no university could teach. Roberto, watching his son grow and flourish in his role as healer and teacher, never ceased to marvel at the extraordinary journey they had shared. "I always knew Leo was special," he used to tell visitors to the ranch, "but it took me time to understand that special doesn't mean different in a bad way. It means different in a necessary way." And Tempest, the horse who had been considered untamable, found in his friendship with Leo not only the peace he had always sought, but a greater purpose. Together, they became living symbols that the most difficult barriers to overcome are not physical or intellectual. They are the barriers of prejudice, fear, and lack of understanding. When the sun sets over Sunny Meadows Ranch and Leo walks beside Tempest through the golden fields, it's impossible not to feel that something fundamental about the world makes sense again. There, in that moment of perfect harmony between a special boy and a horse who found his true nature, resides a simple yet revolutionary truth. The greatest power we possess is our ability to love and accept each other exactly as we are. The story that began with an arrogant challenge from a billionaire became an eternal lesson on humanity. And at the center of this transformation, a boy with Down syndrome proved to the world that the greatest victories are not achieved by force or conventional intelligence, but by the wisdom of the heart and the courage to believe in the best of every living being. This victory echoed far beyond the boundaries of Sunny Meadows Ranch, touching hearts and changing lives in places Leo didn't even know existed. Because some stories transcend their original circumstances to become a permanent part of human hope, eternal reminders that kindness always wins over force, and love always finds a way.